Hello and welcome to another episode of Wednesdays with Woody.
It's Wednesdays.
It's always a pleasant surprise when I realize that it's Wednesday. Welcome to the show, Wednesdays with Woody. If you haven't guessed it, I'm your host, Woody Woods, who is currently just in a harmonious state of love and joy. So it's been all good vibes for me this past week. And yeah, I'll be your host this week. Well, I'm your host every week. I'll be your host as we discuss whatever is trending and topical on the socials and in this life. And to be quite honest with you, I have nothing for you. Just to be frank, my universe, my whole world, has been taken up by it was taken up by and large by the Beyonce album, which was just really good vibrations, good feeling, good feel good. But something else that also took up my time was a little series on Netflix called Uncoupled, which I quite thoroughly enjoyed. It followed the character of the characters of Michael and Colin, who are currently going through a breakup and are just trying to find their way through their new singlehood. More so for Michael than it was for Colin. We got primarily the Michael experience rather than the Colin and Michael experience. And that was quite fascinating. That was quite interesting to explore and to live through all of that. One of my, actually, it was only at the end of the series when I was busy scrolling through social media and I was just like, what did I just watch? Why is no one talking about this? This was actually quite good. It was feel good. It made me feel good. It was joyous. But what I didn't note were the similarities between Uncoupled and Sex and the City. And if you've ever watched Sex and the City and just watched it straight from the beginning to the quarantine time, the reboot. Yeah, the reboot is the right word to use. To the reboot, you'll realize that Carrie is one of the most annoying characters that you can possibly find on TV. She is completely self-absorbed and self-centered, which was what Michael was. And it was I didn't find it annoying in the beginning of Uncoupling, but upon thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a self-centered man this was. But it was a fresh take on Sex and the City, given that it was a completely gay, was it a completely gay cast? No, it was not a completely gay cast. Given that we were following a group of gay friends and their, what do we call, I don't want to call it a hag, because that's just rude. And their female friend, Michael's female friend, as they just travel through their midlife lives. It's always interesting to see characters in this way as they get older and to watch them grow and go through their journeys in middle life. Quite interesting. But the series was quite enjoyable. I quite enjoyed it. Ryan was initially not into it at all. It took me a while to get him on board to watch this with me. But when he got into it, he completely loved it. And I always judge shows by how involved they can get Ryan. Because if it gets Ryan involved, sometimes I'm just like, oh, actually, that's a really good show. Even if it doesn't, sway me. But yeah. We're following Michael as they're going to be a lot of spoilers in this episode. We're following Michael as him and Colin go through a breakup at Colin's 50th birthday party, and then Michael has to go back into the dating world at a 40-something-year-old, which I have no experience about, but it was quite interesting to watch a gay man give a perspective that a lot of us don't necessarily have in our day-to-day lives. And as I've spoken about previously on other episodes of this series, of this show, Wednesdays with Woody, the importance or the missed opportunity, in fact I actually mentioned this last week on the Beyonce one, the missed opportunity of gay youth, in the sense that we do not have elders to look up to to provide us with a full view or full spectrum of what it means to be a gay man at the age of 50 or at 60 or at 70. And they've been some very interesting characters on social media who've come out of the woodworks to give us these perspectives that I think are just valuable and insightful, not only to remind us of where we come from as LGBTQIA plus people, but the journey that it took to get here. History is always really was one of my favorite subjects in high school, so it's really important to me to always remember the past, to honor it, and to reflect upon it and what lessons we can learn from it. And that's what I was getting out of Uncoupled. It was sad in many spaces. A friend did note that. She was like, oh, this is quite sad in a couple of scenes, given that Michael has created a life with his life partner, Colin. They're not married. For 17 years, they've created a life, they've created an existence, they've bought property together, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, Colin decides, actually, I am adios amigos, I'm out of here. Like, I can't be here anymore. Which was a bit jarring for the audience, myself, initially, because there wasn't really an explanation as to why he was leaving the relationship. But we get to that at the end. He gives us a solid explanation as to why, and it was actually a valid explanation. When you've lived with someone for so long and your lives are meshed together, sometimes you need to find yourself. Sometimes you need to go on that journey to discover who you are without that person. So it was a refreshing explanation. Oh, actually, I don't know if if I want to call that explanation refreshing, because actually it's quite tragic if you think about it in our day-to-day lives. But yeah, what I really found entertaining about the specific show was watching Michael come back into the gay dating scene and having to go through dating different types of people, from millennials to men in his age bracket to, well, men with big dicks who really just shocked him up, and was quite humorous to watch, actually, that scene. But yeah, it was refreshing for me, like I've said, like, you don't get these perspectives, or at least when I was growing up, these perspectives were not in the I'm struggling to find the word, aren't I? Were not many. There weren't many of these perspectives out in the world for us to relate to, in terms of representation. I'm always disappointed. I mean, in this case, there was actually a black character, but he was more of a older man just dating, young men, which I always take issue with, but I'm always like, do you, boo? Whatever floats your boat, do you? But it was a good cast. It was a good cast of people. They gave different perspectives, different tones to the show. It didn't feel like the Sex and the City reboot, which for me, I felt a little bit too minded about. I love that it was refreshing, or they'd refreshed Sex and the City for a new audience, but there was just a lot of it that I was just like, there was just a disconnect, specifically because the first series, I don't know how many series were there. I think there was 7 or 8 before the movies came out. There weren't any black people in Sex and the City. They were, but they weren't lead or main characters. And to watch them come back, or watch the writers try to involve a more diverse cast in the reboot, was a bit like, It really did make me take pause and like question, what the hell was I watching as a child? But I do realize that actually this is a lot with shows from the 90s and early 2000s. The cast were predominantly white, which really just which erased everyone else from the narrative and the representation which I strongly believe in. So this was refreshing. You got a mix of characters, you got a mix of different takes, It was a really good show. I really do suggest that if you have nothing better to do and you need to binge on something, binge on that. It's only 8 episodes and they're all like 30 minutes. Each episode is 30 minutes. So it's a quick watch. And I suppose that the reason that this show was just top of mind for me in terms of today's podcast, which I had nothing planned for, was just watching people go through their relationship turmoils and their how they navigate that in middle age and in their lives. I find it really interesting because I am much younger than Michael is in the series and much younger than Colin is. And I suppose when you start dating someone, you're always wondering, is this going to work out? Is this going to pan out the way I hope it's going to pan out? Am I going to see my life with this person to infinity, or whatever the case might be? Whatever several questions you have permeating in the back of your mind in terms of, in terms of your life and your relationship. So that for me it's always interesting to watch, specifically a gay take, seeing that there are so few representations of gay relationships on TV that we can watch and find. In fact, if you need to find them, they're quite difficult to find, and sometimes we're just, as gay people, the side characters and not necessarily the main characters or the ones leading the show, which is always just, for me, it's always such a blessing to find a show on a mainstream platform which is doing the most, or which is attempting to do the most. I don't know. Well, I did see on Rotten Tomatoes that it had gotten like a 77.7% rating. But I gave it an 8.5 because I really enjoyed it. Just specifically because of the representation. If nothing else, it's to me, obviously, as you can note, it's really important to see gay people on TV. And as I've said before, when you're a young child in the world and you have these feelings inside of you and you don't necessarily know what they mean or what they mean, it's good to see something that can give you some form of comfort, even if your reality or your home situation or the life that your everyday lived experience does not reflect the positive affirmations that you necessarily would need in your life, Oh, there's so many things going in my mind as I'm busy saying that last point. I'm thinking about why then gay men, I don't know if it's currently the state, I suppose that it is changing, why gay men interact with their sexual partners or have these long-term fulfilling relationships much later in life, as opposed to our straight counterparts who have that experience early on in life. But I suppose as gay marriage gets legalized and as society becomes a little bit more accepting, then these narratives and these perspectives do change, though in America it does not look that way. It looks like they're going backwards a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, I've spent the last week just binging on a lot of series. I did watch The Royals. I do not recommend it at all, simply because when you get to the last episode of season 4 and you're just left hanging, and then you're just like, okay, where's the finale of this? How do we close all these narratives? And then you have to go search online to figure out that the show was cancelled. Don't watch it. But I did quite enjoy it, and I don't know why I enjoyed it. I was actually telling a friend earlier this week that, oh no, I hate the show, but I need to finish it. So that's what's been happening in my life this past week. Obviously, I think the majority of my time has been taken up by Beyonce, who keeps surprising us every other week with something new. I'm hoping that this Friday she is not deciding to drop Act 2. I just need a break. I just need a solid break from Beyonce and her world for a minute. I just need to find other interests, find other music to entertain myself with, and not necessarily go to Beyonce. Though I will keep her for the gym. The album is fantastic for the gym. But yeah, Thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Wednesday with Woody, where we discussed the Netflix series Uncoupling. If you haven't watched it, go out and watch it. It was really, really good. Yeah, and I hope to see you guys next week. Who knows what I'll be discussing. I hope I've got like a more solid topic for next week. But yeah, thank you so much. Till next week. Ciao.